All right, let's get into North Korea for a moment. This is what's going on. North Korea fired an intercontinental ballistic missile. It normally will send this between continents, which is why they call it an intercontinental ballistic missile.
That's the type of nuanced analysis you get from this show.
No other shows will tell you stuff like that.
Can you slow it down a little
They'll just make you go throughout the day.
Interweta.
But here's the thing. This is what they did. They shot it almost straight up in the air. So they were trying to measure two things. One, distance that they could propel this thing, and its ability to re-enter. I guess it's got to go outside of like some layer of the atmosphere to re-enter and still be intact. So they shot it about 1,700 miles up in the air, which apparently experts in this country are saying that gives it a range of 4,100 miles, which basically includes Alaska, part of Canada. It is not clear that they have the technology yet to make a nuclear weapon small enough to fit in the tip of this thing. But
very far from.
But having a functional intercontinental ballistic missile has been a line which people have dropped and said it's a problem once they get past this. The North Korean Central News Agency said its new intercontinental ballistic missile, the Hwasong-14, was capable of hitting the heart of the United States with large, heavy nuclear warheads. Like we said, that seems like a bit of an exaggeration, but Kim Jong-un had this to say, quote, "The American bastards must be quite unhappy after closely watching our strategic decision." This according to the news agency.
Clip it for the show.
I guess they're not too happy with the gift package we sent them for the occasion of their Independence Day.
We got to keep them interested.
We should often send them gift packages so they won't be too bored.
Oh, my God. This guy is proving more and more every day he's got more balls than his dad.
I mean, but
he's
it's
really
also
outdoing his dad.
It's basically, and apparently Mr. Kim, according to the news agency, made those remarks with a guffaw.
He definitely looks like he could do a guffaw.
The point being is that,
very much so.
I mean, the only difference between Un and Trump seems to be he has a little bit better syntax.
Un has better syntax and
more command of the English language.
He's more successfully taken over his inherited business.
Sean, we're going to send you to North Korea and have you study up on how you do the duties of a press secretary.
Sean, why can't you say anything like that?
All right, look, I don't know what the answer to this is. We don't have the ability to easily knock out their nuclear program because of bunkers and whatnot. We could decimate some aspects of their firepower, but they would probably end up killing anywhere from what I've read, 200 to 500,000 South Koreans.
They could immediately just shell Seoul with conventional weapons.
Yes.
And but the thing that's interesting is definitely that it appears like China's really starting to lose patience with them. And that is the only kind of pressure valve that really could be applied to them. And the other...
Any technology that North Korea has, for the most part, is going to have come from China.
And some fuel from Russia as well, actually. But those are like the only places that deal with them. Exactly. And China's getting fed up. And the other, thing though that's scary is that as crazy as the situation is, there's a certain logic to it. Since like the 90s, like they test, they escalate.
Well, now wait a second.
Counter threat.
This is what I want to make clear here, because a little bit of context is necessary here, because I remember this from the Bush administration. In 1994, Bill Clinton, the warmonger, made a deal with North Korea called the Agreed Framework. Throughout the 90s, for the most part, okay, and this basically, the deal was, we're going to give you, we're going to bribe you, essentially, to not build nuclear weapons. This is the dynamic. We hear libertarians saying, why didn't Lincoln just pay for all the slaves? That type of situation, right? Like, isn't that what I was saying? Like,
yes, except it made sense in this situation.
Well, in this situation, it makes sense because, look, they need aid. You want to impinge upon their sovereignty to build a weapon that they think that they need. You say, okay, look, we're going to show you another way. Here's aid. We give aid to everybody. And so the idea was, we're going to provide cash in some instances, food resources, whatever it was, different other diplomatic concessions. The U.S. did not do a great job in providing what we said we were going to provide through the final years of the Clinton administration. Not a great job. It is understood, though, that North Korea basically towed the line. We were able to put international monitoring in their primary nuclear facility. They basically froze their development and seeking of weapons-grade plutonium, all of this. In October of 2000, before the Bush-Gore election turned into a selection, as you know, Clinton sat down with Kim Jong-il, Un's dad, and made a mutual pledge. We will agree that we're going to have no hostile intent towards each other, specifically, no hostile intent. And when Bush came into office, they just basically literally said, I'm not going to reaffirm that handshake or that proclamation that we have no hostile intent. You had just about everybody in the Bush administration who was anybody try and torpedo specifically the agreed framework. You'll recall, maybe you won't, but David Frum wrote a speech for George W. Bush. And it referred to, I think, when David Frum supposedly wrote it, it was only 2 in the axis of evil, but there was some slight change to his wording, which is part of David Frum's own Reformation project. But the bottom line is what he was taking credit for at the time was an axis of evil that included Iraq, Iran, and North Korea. So by mid-2002, after it was clear not only that the U.S. was not living up to its end of the bargain, but that Bush had come in with a significant amount of hostility, enough to say, like, I'm not going to agree that we don't have hostile intent.
Can I just add one thing? Also directly undermining the South Korean government's policy at the time, which was sunshine. So they not only torpedoed our own relatively successful bilateral one, they screwed their ally, which was pursuing its own parallel track.
Exactly. We're going to do everything we can, not only to not support the agreement we've made in the past, but to isolate you. John Bolton, who was force-fed into this, rammed down our throats in a appointment, a recess appointment to the United Nations, warned Kim to, quote, draw the appropriate lesson from Iraq. Right?
Okay, I'll restart my nuke program.
And that's exactly what they did. They restarted the Yongbyon reactor. They made more weapons-grade plutonium. Then China, which was concerned, got the U.S. and North Korea to participate in a 6-party talks along with South Korea, Japan, and Russia. This is from a piece by a guy named Mike Chinoy, who wrote Meltdown, the Inside Story of the North Korean Crisis. In September of 2005, the parties reached an accord on principles for the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula in which Washington and Pyongyang agreed to respect each other's sovereignty, exist peacefully together, and take steps to normalize their relations. However, on that same week, the Treasury Department designated Macau's Banco Delta Asia, where North Korea maintained dozens of accounts, as a suspected money laundering concern. Because you know how on top of money laundering the Bush administration was. And so it was basically a financial sanction on North Korea right after they had agreed to let's, ease it up. And then the six-party talks fell apart. You had the first nuclear test in October of 2006, which followed that. Even after North Korea asked for another round of multi-party talks, the Bush administration said, no way. In 2007, Chinese again set up six-party talks. Washington basically said, we're not coming unless Pyongyang accepts inspections that were so intrusive. One American official, according to Mike Chinoy, described them as a, quote, national proctologic exam. At that point, you had conservative governments in Seoul and Tokyo, and they moved to halt energy and promised in the 2007 deal, unless North Korea agreed to the new verification members, they would cut off any aid they were giving them at that time. Pyongyang said, fine, goodbye, we're all done. Everything, we get it. We get it. You guys are dicks.
And now that's exactly what happened. And then, but even in that really twisted dynamic, there was like this certain, both sides would push it to the brink and then step back a little bit. And now it's like, with Trump, does he even have the ability to do something like
right? And what this shows,
like
though, this shows like how what George Bush did in 2002 ripples out, and it's like one of those death kidney punches, right? You get it, you walk around for 3 weeks, you think you're fine, then all of a sudden you drop dead because your kidneys collapse or something. I don't know. Maybe those are made-up punches. But my point being is the theoretical death kidney punch.
I wish I could do Bush as good as you, because it could line like, see another Jackie,
and also
another Bruce Lee fan here.
I would add, every time you retweet David Frum, know that more than your average Joe that you're retweeting, he owns a bit, a little bit. In the event that we end up seeing an intercontinental ballistic missile land somewhere, or if we end up seeing hundreds of thousands of South Koreans and hundreds of thousands of North Koreans die, you got to give a little bit of that credit, maybe in the tens or 50,000s to David Frum.
Yes. The whole Republican ally thing is delusional in general, and it's just actually like offensive specifically with him.
Look, use him for what he's worth is one thing, but understand who you're dealing with. And
I don't know how much he's worth, frankly.
I don't know either.
What currency does he really have in the Republican Party?
So far, none. I think all it does is they can go on CNN or MSNBC and make everybody feel like, oh, there are reasonable people in that party.
Exactly. He's actually just carrying water for a toxic brand. Exactly. It's damaging. And his greatest legacy is making war with North Korea more likely. And also, not to mention the invasion we did do.
But they were the axis of evil.
Right. Two countries that were enemies. Two enemies. And one country that had nothing to do with either of them. Well, makes total sense.
That is
modern axis of evil.
That is the thing you don't understand,
David
Michael, about evil. Evil can bring people together, even if they are enemies. We can be evil together. You can come into evil, stop by evil.
From the fucking halal of Iraq to the fucking halal of Iran to the evil little chopstick eaters of North Korea. It is evil. It's big league.
We don't care who you are. Just come in. If you're evil, you're evil. That's all we see. All we see is evil. We don't see any other difference.
And David Frum was like, white man's burden, invade the world, destroy international law, but maybe in the future Iraq will have some type of like pro-Israel petro-state clash of civilizations guy, and now we have, why don't we just nuke them? Except for the Saudis, they're great.
Hey, can't we just?
Saudis are great.
How about it? I'll tell you what. I'll write to China on Twitter. Tell them to just do this.
Try a bit harder, guys.
Did you see that? I did see some footage of Jerry Brown got an official state. Like, he actually got to meet with the Chinese premier, like, which is pretty rare for like a governor. And they were just talking about climate change. And, you know, it's ridiculous to read too much of the body language, but there was this element of like, you could just see him sitting there and projecting onto him like, Jesus Christ. Why are you not?
We got a Buzz Aldrin body language video. We'll run that later in the program.
I don't think there's any
no
projection
sound.
in that one.
There's no sound.
That one's very clear.
Hi, folks. Sam Seder here. We still need your help on our Patreon page. YouTube ads have come back, but not nearly as much as we had before. So if you can help us out, any little bit helps. Head over to our Patreon page right at this URL, and you'll help us keep helping you by making videos